You said there is no one way to be deaf. Can you talk about your journey to embracing your identity and what advice would you give to someone who is still on that journey?
I'm not really sure if this would apply to all identities, but for me, one way I embrace my own identity is losing it in the first place. Just because growing up, I was in the hearing family, but I always knew that I had hearing loss. So I had hearing aids. I went to speech therapy. I had the classic mainstream student experience. For those who don't know what mainstream means, it means two kinds of deaf education right now. For example, there are some others, but the main two, you either are mainstreamed or you go to a deaf institute. And mainstream is when you have a deaf person who goes to a regular hearing school and they provide accommodations, and you just live your life as close to what you think of, it's the most regular student experience compared to other options like a school for the deaf, where they specialize in deaf education and they will encourage sign language being used and encourage a deaf identity. So they're very different. And oftentimes those kids will live on campus at the deaf school compared to a mainstream school where typically you'll go back and forth on a bus like a regular kid. And I grew up learning how to accommodate hearing people. So you think the opposite, right? You think hearing people would try to accommodate me, but really I was accommodating them. And in that was my foundation for my identity, where, okay, I'm in a world where I am alone with my kind. So what do I do to educate people? And how do I make sure when they meet other people like me that they don't do them harm, offend them? And Amanda, you've known me since I was a student. So you've seen me speaking in class. You've seen me try to blend in with my environment. But I have learned since high school that blending for so many years and years, how it's a huge sacrifice to myself. And it only recently hit me. And when it finally hit me, and honestly, the catalyst was I had gone to college. And it was the University of Rochester, very close to RIT. And I wanted to still hold on to my deaf identity. And I did that by reaching out to deaf people in the community and signing with them. However, the people that I was with didn't fit me. And they themselves were deaf, but they had a different idea of what deaf looked like. And I didn't fit that mold. So when I realized that they felt that way, my identity was in crisis. I didn't want to do anything related to being deaf culture. I didn't want to sign. I was very closed off from the deaf community. And then when I figured my identity, when I mentioned losing your identity, once you lose it, it's like, what do? You start thinking to yourself and decide, okay, give it another try. Tried to fall into the deaf community again. And I was lucky enough to be in Rochester, where the deaf community is huge. And now I have found my identity again. And the foundation is not in service to other people, it's in service to myself. And I have those experiences. I never wanted anyone to experience what I experienced. And if you yourself, you decide to speak, or you're mainstreamed, or you have some hearing, or you enjoy music or whatever, plus you still identify as deaf, more power to you. I never wanted anyone to feel, oh, I'm not deaf enough, or, I'm not queer enough, other identities. I'm not binary enough, or whatever it is. And I hope that we can get to a point where people don't have to lose their identity to find it. It should just be natural. It should be encouraged. And and being responsible for hearing people, it's their responsibility to figure out how they can be involved with the system and make things more normal for everyone, instead of us giving up of ourselves because we're not considered the norm. So, for example, like someone who's a white person, they have to be careful of their choices of words, especially around people of color, Black people. And how can I break that norm? I've heard stories of Black people that have to code switch, for example. And which, for those who don't know, means sound less like themselves and try to fit more in their environment. So maybe to people like me. So I'm not going to say, just talk however you want to, but really it's about making the environment more comfortable for them and saying, oh, okay, I can be more flexible. I can be more authentic. And as a white person, never can consider that they weren't showing their authentic self. And it's just about being self-aware of my own privilege and how I can influence other people. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
No, that was, yeah, you definitely can speak on these topics, and none of that was fluff. So don't worry. As I mentioned before, there's always going to be a question that you have more to speak on. And I know that you have a lot of experiences. So everything you said was chef's kiss. Raven has the next question for you.
Yeah. What is one thing you want the hearing community to know about the deaf community, and how can the hearing community be better allies?
Great question. I am so happy you asked. Really? Well, the first thing is I want people to know about deaf people is we are more than our hands. Some people think, oh, I'm learning sign language. I'm gonna get along with the deaf community and everyone will live happily ever after. If you're learning sign, that's great. But it does not mean that you understand the complexities within our community, the complexities of your hearing privilege. and how the dynamics change when a hearing person enters the room. Or I'll provide an example. Say you're with a group and they're both deaf and hearing friends, and they go to a restaurant. If the waiter comes over, says, "Hello, how can I help you?" Deaf people decide to order first. And they order by maybe showing something on their phone or pointing to the menu. And then everyone else takes their turn ordering, and the hearing person might speak to the waiter. And oftentimes the waiter will instantly gravitate towards the hearing person and say, "Do you mind telling them or interpreting for them?" So I have to recognize the power dynamics in that situation and how their hearing privilege can change that. Or now it's when deaf people are equal, now we feel not so equal in the room because someone has decided to speak. And that doesn't mean that there aren't deaf people that speak for themselves. There are many deaf people that do. But hearing people often don't recognize, oh, I have to change based off of my environment, or I influence my environment. And personally, I like when hearing people join us and point to the menu or type on their phone. Not necessarily faking it like I'm deaf too, but they understand the power that they have. And that's just one example I have. Another thing I want hearing people to know is we are not monoliths. Deaf people enjoy music. Some don't. Deaf people sign. Some don't. Some read lips and some don't. Some have cochlear implants, some have hearing aids, and some don't. Some do and then later decide they don't want them. I myself had a hearing aid, but I would rather focus on visual communication than trying to hear you or struggle to hear you. Those kinds of things are very stereotypical that people say, "Oh, sure, look at me when communicating," or "make sure you don't eat at the same time as you're speaking." Those are the kinds of things that are you can easily Google what I've provided, but it's sometimes more nuanced. And that's what I really wanted to get through to hearing people.
You really don't know how to communicate with, or how to handle something you're not used to when you're so set in certain ways, like growing up. And so personally, I never had an interaction with a deaf person until probably college. I don't know. Not saying they didn't exist, because obviously you guys are out there, but but yeah, I just never had that experience. So when I first encountered a deaf person, I was working at, my town grocery store, and I kind of froze. But it also made me want to communicate with them, and I didn't know how to, but I wanted to understand and learn. So yeah, I'm slowly starting to understand more of like what should be done and what's acceptable. And I only hope that, okay, cursive may have been taken out of the school classroom, but maybe more information on for kids to actually learn how to handle, different situations, how to handle interacting with somebody who is deaf, a person of color, you know, blind, whatever, you know, like whatever these other things are, I think these are important. So anyways, I digress. So thank you. That was great, Phelan. Okay, we're coming up on the last question, then we have a bonus. You chose the words witty, ambitious, and imaginative. Can you elaborate on why?
Ooh. Well, first, witty. Hmm. I associate witty with being humorous, and I'm sure it shows through my videos. You know, and I come from a place where many people, like you just said, have never met a deaf person until later in their life. So I come from that world. So hearing people, you know, your culture, your world, we're not necessarily staying on the same ground. But how can I build bridges to bring those communities together? Or maybe not have, you know, maybe we don't have the same background, but you have to set up a connection first before you teach a new subject. And my method is just with humor. I like to make people laugh. And when people laugh, they're more willing to say, oh, okay, you know what? Sit with me, ask me questions. I can ask you questions, and we can have more of camaraderie. So it's just breaking the ice, really. And myself, as far as being witty and fast with my responses, I like to tease. And it's easy for me. It's my way of breaking the ice. And after you set up the foundation for that, anything is possible. So that is why I like the word witty.
Ambitious.
Oh, so ambitious. So I've had my hands in a lot of pots, as you had said. So I'm always searching for things to learn more about, you know, that whether it shocks people that I have many abilities. And you can try to beat or hearing people their expectations of a deaf person. You try to, one example is when I was mainstreamed, many people thought, oh, you're deaf, I can't play an instrument. Oh, you can't sing, you can do X, Y, Z. So out of spite, and not really self-motivation, but out of spite, I would join so many clubs at school. I would join band as a kid. I joined choir. I joined theater. I did mock trial, all of these different things. And some I did enjoy, but some I was like, why am I here? But I did it because I really wanted to say, hearing people can't tell me what I can and can't do. So do I enjoy singing? In the shower, maybe, but not in front of an audience, no. You couldn't pay me enough. Well, maybe you could, but there's a lot, maybe a lot of money. Fine, I'll sing. Over the years, I did keep that, what else can I do attitude. And learning how to knit. I learned how to play the flute. I learned how to do origami. Just those things that I can bring to the table with me. Yeah, and then just really ambitious when it comes to learning. If there's a question that shows up, I will research it. And I remember the other month I saw on a wall, my mom had her sewing machine that on the wall that she had never used. And I saw it there and I was like, you know what? I want to learn how to sew. So I just took it down. I had some things that I need to have fixed clothes-wise. But, in the same time, I was researching how to sew, how to make clothes, what different stitches are involved. So it was just really a fascinating process as far as being really too ambitious. And I remember for the last word, imaginative, I remember being in high school and I took some, like a history class, and they were talking about ethics of war, whether or not it's necessary or not. But more specifically, nuclear bombs is what they focused on, which is a heavy topic, just warning people. But we were talking about, is it necessary? Oh, and I said, I was stubborn. I said, no, it's not necessary really to war or nuclear war. And I got in a fight with the professor and I said, no, you don't need these ethics. You don't need it. And she called me idealistic. But I kept that spirit with me since, and it's like, it just shows in my social media, for example. I want people to share their stories and I want people to feel seen. And if you are maybe a black black forager. Oh, like let's say you're a black forager, you go in the woods looking for plants and that's your passion. I know there's a young person out there who has been waiting to see that representation. It doesn't matter how niche it might be. I know there are people out there who want to see that. I know that there are people out there who want to see queer representation. Maybe a chemist who's really passionate about solving cancer. I know that there's an audience for that, but that's why I always encourage people to be included. Share your stories because someone will always appreciate it. And I like to think that there are more people that will share their stories. And the more they do that, the more we can solve the world's bigger problems. And if that makes me too much of a idealistic person, so be it.